If we're bad on the drive, it's not us getting the bad review. The hotel's going to get that. That relentless hospitality translates back to the employee, because when the employees are happy and the culture's right, that comes out in how they interact with our clients and their guests. Bad culture means bad interactions, not good hospitality.
Welcome to Voice Activated, the podcast dedicated to unlocking the power of employee feedback. I'm Sean Fitzpatrick, founder of TalentMap and your host. In each episode, we'll dive into real-world examples and best practices, as well as some lessons learned from employee surveys, pulse checks, focus groups, 360s, and more. If people are at the heart of your business, you're in the right place. Expect open conversations, practical advice, inspiring stories from companies that are getting it right, and some reflections from those who've hit a few bumps along the way. Tune in, listen up, and let's activate the voice of your employees. Today, I'm really excited because, as many of you know, the military system is a very structured system, or can be a very structured system. There's a clear chain of command. You have a pretty good sense of what the expectations are. But in the private sector, that's not always the case. Often, things are a little more nebulous. Rules are often unwritten. Cultures can vary quite a bit, and from company to company, and even group to group, or geography to geography, depending on what's going on in the business. And how things run are often very specific to the industry and to the founders and leaders of the company, unlike the military. And today's guest has lived through that transition. After nearly a decade training leaders in the U.S. Marine Corps, he now leads a HR frontline team in a high turnover, high pressure hospitality industry. And what he's learning is this: the biggest leadership shifts aren't tactical, they're often cultural. Michael is a human resource manager for parking management company Savannah region. He leads a people strategy across multiple hospitality-based parking operations. And before stepping into HR, he spent 8 years as a trainer, mentor, and leader inside the Marine Corps, shaping teams across the Southeast U.S. and rebuilding underperforming units. Michael, welcome to Voice Activated.
Hey, Sean, thanks for having me on today.
Your background's quite interesting because you've worked extensively in the military and then moved over to private sector. I guess what I'd like to know a little bit about is just what your journey was like, why you end up choosing to join the military, what that experience was like, and then what caused you to move over to the private sector.
Yeah, for sure. So you look at my LinkedIn and it's this roadmap, this journey of cobblestones all over the place, right? 2003 is when I joined the Marine Corps initially, at the height of the invasion of the Iraq War, the start of the Iraq War. The millennial generation, we went one of two ways, and I was on that patriotic side, the towers getting hit and whatnot. I wanted to do my part. And it sounds kind of corny, but that was the drive to initially do that. If I wasn't going to do that, I would have ended up in the Art Institute in film or something. I thought it was a good transition. I made that jump into the infantry. And I did a couple deployments and did my time on the ground there, and I loved every minute of it. Some minutes were harder than others, but I still loved all of them. Then around 2011, got selected for recruiting duty, and a lot of people don't know that in the military, recruiting duty and certain other special collateral duties are not volunteer duties. Like 80% of those professionals usually get voluntold or pulled out of their particular jobs and thrusted into that environment. And it's a challenging one. A lot of people don't volunteer for it because it's a sink or swim kind of industry. It's a sink or swim kind of situation. You go from being supported by a platoon full of people and a company element to being alone and unafraid with 3 other recruiters trying to convince them that the job that they're trying to get after college is not worth it, right? So it's a challenging turn. I was pretty good at it. I didn't like it, but I was pretty good at it. And those were probably some of the most challenging years of my career, were those first 3 years on recruiting. Personally, professionally, spiritually, I went through a lot. But I ended up going back to the fleet, did another deployment, came back to HR full-time. This time, I became a career recruiter, and there's only about anywhere between 484 and 532 of those in the Marine Corps footprint across the entire in the entire planet. We have recruiting elements in Cuba, in Germany, Japan, you name it. We've probably got DoD elements in those spots, and we recruit. They're like, well, how are you recruiting Germans and whatnot? We're recruiting DoD students, right? The sons and daughters of our upper level staff that are deployed. So those come with its own unique challenges. I found myself in the last 3 years overseeing a lot of the operations in the southeastern footprint of the United States, from Puerto Rico, Cuba, all the way up to Boone, North Carolina, all the way across Jackson, Mississippi, into New Orleans and Louisiana. So last 18 months, 3 weeks out of the year, I was driving around and I was training middle managers, recruiters on how to keep their teams engaged and focused, not just on the activity-based work and the minutia of contacting those young people, but being able to translate their experience and how they feel about the Marine Corps in interview presentations, benefits, explanations, job placements, etc. And then while doing that, also staying true to the institutional core values of being a Marine. So I was doing that, and I got a lot of joy out of that. So that was all before I entered PMC.
Yeah, that'd be interesting because it's how do you translate the inner purpose and mission of what often drives people to join that type of organization to a young person, right? That's sort of like trying to find their way in the world, and even in organizations today, that's a challenge of how do you have leadership and the vision of where the leadership is going, and then translate that into day-to-day work of what people do on the ground. And it's sometimes hard to make those connections. So that sounds like a fantastic sort of training ground to start to understand how to take that and translate that into sort of day-to-day things that young people can understand. You mentioned one thing, I do want to come back to it, how that first 3 years in recruitment sort of really helped you grow. And spiritually, mentally, all of those aspects. Can you just tell me a little bit about that a little bit more? I thought that was interesting because I'd like to hear what aspects really sort of grabbed you and sort of helped you sort of expand as a person and individual around this type of thing.
Yeah, keyword resiliency, right? I went through. I've been deployed. I've been a combat veteran. Nothing prepared me for what I was encountering when I went on recruiting duty the first time. Those first 9 months, you think, I guess, the confidence that comes with being a Marine, being highly trained, and being in your early mid-20s. I was physically fit. I was active, young, ambitious. Wanted to really make my impact on the institution and the community I was serving, which at the time was a small town called Tifton, Georgia. Tifton, Georgia is a small interstate town off the I-75. If you know of it, you probably are from there or you have family there. Me being a guy from Los Angeles, California, born and raised in Southern California, going to school and high school and college in Northern California, there was no way I could go back to California after that living there. They call it the friendly city, and they mean it, right? It was the best experience I've ever had in a community. And because of that, I really committed myself to serving that population. I went from serving colonels and majors and company commanders to serving the city council, parents, teachers, counselors about the best interests of their students and their children and their young adults. And I stress that. I used to have conversations with parents that were worried about their sons and daughters going off to go fight a war they didn't believe in. I've been chewed out, cussed out, kicked out of houses, and then in the same week brought back for dinner, apologized to, and signed paperwork, right? So the ups and downs of the emotional roller coaster that you go into a place and then you come back out of it, that takes a toll. And that toll was coming back to me at home. When you're recruiting and you're interviewing at a high volume turnover rate, at a high volume full cycle recruitment effort, you don't want to talk anymore. Like when you get off of work, you're done. You don't want to talk. You don't want to engage with anyone. And that's what the case was for my first marriage, right? When I was married for 7 years, coming onto the duty, and I disengaged, I unplugged, and because of that started to dissolve. And like most Marine military professionals in general, right? I just buried myself in my work and exasperated the problem. And that's where I've learned when people talk about work-life balance, that's what they're talking about. Those are those challenging things that leaders don't really, that they shy away from, right? Like in the military, it's easy. Like you mentioned, tactical to strategic, like, engagement, listening to people. There was no one I was going to be able to talk to that was going to give me a sympathetic ear. We've all been through it, like just suck it up, move forward. We have a quota to make, etc. And you put your head down, you buy that. That's acceptable when you're a young 20 something who swore an oath rather than, signed a contract. So, I gave that up. And then the next, I guess, 2.5 years, 2 years following that, it was every time I had a personal shortcoming, I really excelled at work. If I wrecked my car, I got probably a 300% increase on my quota and I made it. Right. So like I was translating that pain into work. And whereas I'm getting all the kudos and all the benefits of that work, I'm slipping as a human, as a person. And it took me about a year to recover from that. So.
Wow. Yeah, that's and such a young age. You're in your 20s when you sort of went through all of that, eh? Because that often that's a great way to build, strength and character. And but you probably didn't maybe realize it right in the middle of it. As you're going through it, you're certainly like, "What am I doing?" But as you reflect back, you start to think about, "Wow, that really was an opportunity to learn and grow more about yourself and more about what you're good at and how to balance, all." Because I've worked in sales many years off and on. Xerox is one of the, first business I worked. You're out, when I started, there was no, internet and Zoom call. Yours day to day. You had to go and knock on so many doors. You had your little black book. You had to mark down all the cold calls you did. And you're just talking all day long. So you come home, I know the feeling. You just want to veg. You don't want to share. You don't want to talk. You don't want to chat. You just want to veg for a while and decompress. And it's a real challenge. But it also taught me in the similar maybe way it taught is also the type of work I do like to do. It's just getting that balance of doing it, but also being able to engage with others around you, whether it's, your spouse, your family, or the community. And it sounds like you've got to a place in terms of the work you did down in Georgia. What was the name of the town that you were supporting community?
Yeah, Tifton, Georgia, Tifton. Yep.
Yeah.
So
A place where you were doing that.
Oh yeah, and I got the key to the city there when I left.
Oh, wow.
That's how invested I was.
Wow.
Right? Yeah, it's on my wall
Yeah.
behind me. One of my crowning achievements. And you're right. It was an opportunity to learn in any profession, whether it's with what I'm doing right now with PMC, especially with PMC. I'm finding is experience leads to credibility, right? And going through those hardships gives you that experience, and that experience allows you to see when people are struggling and understand what that struggle is. And then when you communicate to those employees, those supervisors about that struggle, they believe you. They feel it from you, and you can't make that up. That only comes from going through that pain and struggling. I find myself having to do it right now with PMC, where I've never been a valet. My first day on the job, I had a manager talk to me and said, "Hey, look, you just suspended my guy because of X. Who's going to cover that shift?" And I was like, "You know what? Someone should have told you this is my first day mistake. I'll cover the shift." And he's like, "Well, it's a night shift." I was like, "Well, I'll do it." Right. And they're just like, whoa, blown away. And I stood in that line. I stood that shift for about 2.5 hours or so. And this is not easy. It wasn't just as easy as standing there taking keys and opening doors, right? So gave me a newfound respect for it.
What the work is like. Well, yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up. So it's I guess you move from then a great experience in the military over to the private sector, and I guess it's interesting because often, well, I've never worked in the military. I grew up near a military base, so I got to get a bit of a sense of a lot of the colleagues I ran into or worked in the military, but it does seem to give a structure, a rhythm, a purpose often. that doesn't always exist as much in private sector and civilian life. And I guess especially for you going from uniform to a civilian type of environment, I guess I would like to hear what surprised you most in the private sector, how leadership actually works, particularly where there's no rank and file, where it's your commanding officer said this, okay, we'll do it. It doesn't always work that way, even though I think a lot of CEOs and leaders would like it to work that way. It doesn't always work that way.
Yeah, I think my last posting at the 6th Marine Corps District for the Southeast, I was two echelons from my immediate commanding officer, right? So I was exposed to a lot of senior professionals, a lot of senior officers, and that helped with I guess deconditioning me as an enlisted Marine to more acclimate to talking like a human, right? Because when those commanders are not in the field or not talking to the troops, they're still CEOs and COOs and CFOs of their particular space. They just have different titles, and they're trying to, most of the time they're on a 3-year tour, 2-year tour, and they're history majors, geographic majors. Like, they don't have maybe the business acumen to run a business at this national level, but here they are, thrusted in there because of their leadership acumen. So they're searching for their niche too. They're searching for what to do, and being that career recruiter, being in that very finite selected group of what we call 8412s, career recruiters. It's our MOS designator. They relied heavily on our own expertise, being in that industry for as long as we did. So I learned a lot from them, and they, as good leaders, were willing to learn a lot from us. Do you have the bad CEOs, right? Yeah. Yeah, they come in. The issue is that in the government, or maybe in the government, maybe we're talking about DOGE, but in the military, I think the only issue that you run into as a professional that gets you really frustrated is that the performance metric that would otherwise, I guess, temper the civilian or private sector doesn't matter in the government sector, right? You can fail utterly. But if you're of a certain caliber, it's just kind of noise, right? Someone's going to come in and clean that up at some point, right? So, like, I think in the private sector, it's a little less forgiving, right? You see profit margins drop in a month, someone's getting axed fairly quickly.
That dynamic, that market dynamic really sort of changes things a lot quicker than in government or military. But I think in military, often there is some, standard operating procedures and chain of command and clarity around that, and not so much in. Have you noticed in private sector differences in terms of understanding, how do I decipher how the culture is, or how do I know what the rules are in terms of way to work here? Have you noticed differences, or is that just a perception we have as civilians that, and it's just another organization? Yeah, it's different and different, but it's just it'd be interesting to see if it was obvious to you that it's really different and you got to navigate in a different way, or is it just, part of sort of just a different organization? And like anything, as you switch through them, you've got to learn to navigate.
Well, it's like what I say to managers or leaders. I say, it's not the area, it's you, right? Like you either adapt or you don't, right? And good leaders, good managers, good supervisors, even good subordinates and employees, they know and they recognize where growth needs to happen, and then they adapt it, right? Me being from Los Angeles, coming to South Georgia to recruit in a small town, it didn't take long for me to acclimate in order to be successful, because failure wasn't the option. So it's a mindset. I think, to your point, is it a perception difference? I would agree with that, right? Like, during the job search, I was on the job search prior to getting out of the service for about 4 solid months. And I'll throw some analytics, because I'm a recruiter, right? I have some analytics. I threw my resume out at 283 different companies, all in the Inc. 5000, all at a certain rate, all at a certain type of role that I wanted to commit to. The idea for me was not to step down, but to either move laterally or up from where I was at in the military, which is tough, right? You got a 40-year-old that's controlling the Southeast sector. And I found out real quick in the private sector, that's a tall order. There's not normally somebody that's in charge of that much, market space, right? At my age or experience. So I found myself running into wall after wall after wall. And then when I did get interviews going, um, the military, they prepare you for exiting. They give you the things to say, but when you're in that interview, breaking that initial wall, like the breaking down that wall of like, yeah, I understand what you're saying. I've dealt with X, and them believing that that's going to equal Y. It's like, yeah, but did you though? I mean, you're just saying you've dealt with, sexual harassment claims or equal opportunity claims, but the military, the DoD, they don't have to respond to OSHA, or they don't have to respond to certain federal or state regulations like we do. So how much of that do you really understand? I was like, well, regardless of if we do or not, those are our guiding principles. Those are the things that form our SOPs, right? So like we still do it, right? But convincing a CEO or CFO or some other human resource officer that you do that, it's a tall order, and they can't, if they've never been in the military. They have no way to break that perception. They don't know. So they're not wrong, and then, people say thank you for your service for a reason. When you stay in the military for this long, you're assuming a lot of risk. You're taking the best years of your life, the years where you're probably single or growing into a young family, to where you can adjust a budget or a salary and really learn a career field. You give that up when you join the military. And you're investing in a career field that has a shelf life, has an expiration date. And when it does, what are you going to do when you get out, right? So, and that's what I ran into. Luckily, after 16 interviews, after going through all those other resumes, having a wife that can support me through this. I tell you, my wife, we have 7 kids. We've been married for 12 years now. Yeah, she's amazing. She's amazing. If I didn't have her to keep me grounded, I probably would have panicked. Like we mentioned during the green room talk, I was nervous. I was unemployed for 13 days, right? I need a job, like I need a job now. So, but I got with PMC, very career focused oriented place, and they put on the job posting military friendly, and I've seen that so many times. And there's not a lot of companies that are willing to actually deliver on that promise. I could tell you 3 or 4 more companies that I applied to prior to that specifically said military wanted, that didn't even give me an interview. PMC did. They sought me out. I made a few phone calls, talked to some of the HR managers. They flew me out to the headquarters, to multiple regions, to really invest in the culture of PMC and their valets. Really turn around and say, this is what right looks like. This is what best case scenario looks like. This is what we want your territory to look like. And they told me they're taking a real chance on me. I'm from Savannah, Georgia. So I've been here for a better part of a decade. So I'm in market. PMC has a 85 to 90% internal promotion rate. They do not hire externally. They just don't do it. I'm one of the first, and it's because they want the market to turn, and they think that I'm going to be that solution. I know I'm going to be that solution, and in another 30 so odd days, I'm going to prove it, right? But thank God for PMC and taking that time to really invest in my interview process and hearing me out, and being able to relay that to their C-suite and take a chance on me for sure.
Well, there's a couple of things I want to touch on. I want to get back to PMC, and I want you to tell me a little bit about the organization, the culture. Just going back to how private sector or people who haven't worked in perceive, government or military is. I tend to agree with you, and we do hiring here also at our company. And when we have people applying, because we're in Ottawa, most employees or most people here, government is a big employer, sort of like a mini Washington, if you will. And often we're very concerned. They say, well, I ran a budget for, I had 500 people reporting to me and so on. And we often think, well, yeah, you did, but you didn't really have the constraint of revenue. You just had a budget that you were given. So was it really managing 500? Because it's hard to imagine what's it like there, and is it really, or is it more like managing 25? And trying to make that connection. It is very difficult. Often you sort of think, well, in business, there's risk. So you think, well, should we take the risk? What if it's not a person at that level and they just don't realize it yet because they've never worked in it? And you often pass over that because of that lack of market dynamic or revenue on the other side of the balance sheet, if it's on the finance side or whatever side you're looking for.
No, you're not wrong, right? Like in the private sector, I've already very quickly understand. I mean, we go over budgets almost weekly down here, right? And those budgets, claims and whatnot directly translate into what the employees are getting paid, right? Like that matters, right? So like the more proficient you are, the more employees, are either being hired or increasing their pay or whatever the situation is. The better the company is, the better everyone is. Right. Whereas in the military, you don't have that same thing. And on that note, you said, like, Evan, was it really 500 people? I used to tell managers all the time in the Marine Corps footprint is that when you're on recruiting duty, I got it. You're a Marine 24/7. Like that's the thing we say. So you're fine. The new managers, new recruiters will sit in that office until X hour, right? Just in the minutia. Like they won't leave, right? Because time equivalates to work. Now, whether it's productive work, that's irrelevant. As long as I sit here, I'm giving an effort and they convince themselves they're doing that. And I said, that's the first habit you got to break is that you're not a Marine 24, you're a Marine 24/7, but you're not a recruiter 24/7. You need to be able to break away. You did 8-hour shifts, 6-hour shifts, make sure that they're fresh and going home, sleeping, all these things that we don't take account for because we're not hourly employees. They're all on salary. I don't have to worry about when these people go to sleep. And then there's they're grown adults. They can take care of themselves. No, they're not. They joined the service out of high school. They had parents up until they had us. It's illuminating. You're right. Like, and it's a legitimate concern. It's one of the first walls I have to break down in interviews is that I got it. You don't think I've managed payroll? I've never made payroll. I never had to worry about hours or taking care. I assure you, in my past life, because I wasn't always running around with a rifle in the field. The last 8 years, I've been dealing with that exact thing. I promised. So.
So let me you talk about PMC. Tell me a little bit about the organization. How big is it? What do they do? And then touch a little bit about two other aspects. What do you guys do around? So I'm going to throw a few questions out here. Listening. How do you get feedback? How do you get input from employees, leaders, managers throughout the organization? And what makes PMC an interesting or unique organization? I want to sort of cover through some of those. So first, just start with PMC. Tell me a little bit about the organization, the size, how long it's been around, what it does. How you mentioned earlier on when we were talking back prior to their podcast start here is you thought, for example, management of cars and valet was all part of the hotel, and you're surprised that it wasn't. It's sort of a separate business. So tell me a little bit about it.
They were talking to me about the job description. You say the right words when you come to HR, right? HR is the same regardless of the industry, right? It's a people-focused profession, right? So I said all the right things. But then when it came down to the industry knowledge, I was just like, I had to make other calls. They put me in contact with a prior Marine who's in the commercial sector, a Chad Armistead, great human being. Been with the company for about 8 years. And he was on the commercial side. And so he's explaining to me commercial stuff. And I'm like, hey, this is hospitality, right? It's like, we got 4 divisions, right? We handle commercial, we handle hospitality, we handle, medical valets, we handle like parking structures, right? And I'm just like, oh, wow. So that's expansive. And then I get a PowerPoint presentation in an email saying, here's a little bit more about the company. 46 states, almost 48, depending that we're servicing across the country. We got plus 7,000 employees since last I looked at it 2 weeks ago. We probably got more. We just in my footprint, we've hired 8 people in the last week, right? So this company is one of the fastest growing companies in the Inc. 5000. They've grown 348% in the last year from 2025. right?
What's driving that growth? What is
Right.
it?
Well, it was a leadership focus, right? Like our C-suite, like what we're dealing with now, our new CFO, our CEO, who started as a parking valet attendant, who's now the CEO of the company. That's a huge metric of it. The structure. We had the foundational 5. We have RAMP. We have. There's a few acronyms I'll throw out there, and I'm still learning all the acronyms since I got here, right? But they're in their relentless hospitality approach that they do with their clients, right? The hotels, or like in the hospitality industry that I'm aware of right now, is the hotels or the vendors, the stadiums, where we're servicing our clients. We focus 100% on their guest and the guest experience, right? That's what's unique for PMC. From what I've noticed from my research of the other companies, is that guest experience is almost, it's as important as doing the job right, but it's a central focus. And the clients know that. When you see a PMC shirt on the drive, when you see a PMC sign out in a parking lot, that parking lot's getting cleaned and maintained. There's cameras watching it. That's a secure location. Moreover, you go on the drive and they take your bags, or they're taking your keys and they're putting it on that carabiner and hustling from the drive to the garage and moving your vehicles back and forth. They care about what you think about the job they're doing. And our clients love that because they do think it's the hotel. And
Well, I assumed it was.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
if we're bad on the drive,
Yeah.
it's not us getting the bad review. The hotel's going to get that, right? So it's important who they pick, who's handling your garage, your cars. So yeah, that relentless hospitality translates back to the employee, because when the employees are happy, taken care of on manageable shifts, and the culture's right, like what we were talking about earlier, when you listen to your employees and you translate that comes out in how they interact with our clients and their guests, right? Bad culture means bad interactions, not good hospitality. So we gotta build that from ground up. And going more directly to your point, how do we gauge those metrics? Right now, we're getting client surveys back. Our command deck, right? Like I'm still kind of in the mode, but our C-suite, our operations officers and whatnot, push out these client surveys to our hotels, and they give us the feedback, right? They tell us who's doing the right things, who's doing the wrong things, what they want to see more of, right? It's not enough sometimes to just have our shirt on the drive picking up the keys, right? Are we doing regular walkabout, right? Like, are we looking for trash, or are we looking for other ways to hold the door, like that white glove service that we can deliver to our clients? They want to know, and they want to also see the training that's going on, because like I said, those couple hours I worked on the drive, I had that manager kind of walk me through it and say, hey, take me through it. And I failed. I failed the initial. I parked the car. I was like, okay, I parked the car. We're in the garage. I didn't hit anything. I should be good, right? He's like, yeah, but when you got out of the car, you didn't lock the door. I'm like, oh my God, right? Like it's that simple. And it's like, so that's not like a point. It's like, no, that's a fail, right? Because like, the client's going to come down here, try to open this car door's open. We got a problem. He locked the car. He put the key on his carabiner and walked the 5 steps to the box, took it off and put it in there. So the control was there. And that's a military kind of attribute, like the attention in the details. I was like, okay, good. I can do that. I can adapt to that. That's something that we do in the military. I can translate that here. So that gave me a little bit of a comfort that is like, okay, now that I've transitioned, now that I'm here, where can I really drive my focus? And I can work with employees. These are just young troops, and they're still in the age bracket. Those young valets are between the ages of 18 and 25. That's who I've been working with for 21 years. So yeah, that's where I got some comfort in that.
And I never thought about, but a couple of things you pointed out there. In a way, because your work and PMC's work reflects on the hotel so much, they're a really good set of eyes to how well each of their units are doing. And so getting feedback from them is a great way to understand what's working, what isn't working, all of that stuff. I think that's really interesting because it gets that sense of accountability really built in there. And I know my experiences with valet and using those services, from time to time when I stop at hotels, I just love it when they run. or just even jog a little bit, even though they don't have to, because it's not like, oh, I'm in a rush or whatever. But it just shows that hustle and energy and eagerness and all of that stuff. I don't know why, but it does, it speaks to me and probably a lot of customers like me that sort of would like, hey, I like this. I trust them more. I feel better about it because it's the other thing is security is important because you're like, oh, should I leave this in my car? Should I not? Where's my car going? Who's going to take it? Are they going for a drive in it or, whatever? Because you have those cliches of movies where, the valet takes off for a while. But those little interactions around hustling and courteous and all that sort of stuff really speaks a lot to how well you feel comfortable handing over those keys for sure. The other thing I'd like to hear is what have you seen that makes PMC really a unique place? Like, why would a young person want to work there? Do they get paid well on tips, or do they get is it the culture? Is it an opportunity to grow their career? How do they view it when they join at an 18, 19, 21, 22-year-old?
Well, as far as the tips are concerned, I guess working and talking to the valets in the last couple of weeks is that they're aware that their ability to lift a chin, right, to really hustle and drive that customer experience translates directly into a tip. People want to tip their hospitality service, right? They want to tip the valets because that it's a part of it, right? Like it's not a guilt trip. You want to reward good hard work. And honestly, if you've ever tried to park in Savannah, Georgia, good luck, right? It's probably safer to give our valets the keys, right? Like, because this is I don't like driving around downtown, but the tips are good. But I think more or less for PMC, from what I've experienced, just from my own personal experience, there was a genuine effort to welcome me into the fold, right? I found out real quick, and I've been using it as a joke for the last couple of weeks. We promote internally 85%, right? So I'm the top 15%, right? I'm an outsider coming in, and I tell them all the time, it's like I'm not going to let you down. I feel this urge to really support the company and succeed because I'm from the outside of the hospitality industry. I have no hotel experience. I don't have the general manager experience. We got a lot of guys that they're either in the hospitality on the parking side, or they're on the hotel side, or they have something to do with interaction with the guest. And I just didn't have that, so it's making me work a little bit harder, right? Because I want people to see that forward lean thing, and I think that's the difference with PMC. Now that I know, right? I think about my valets like when I go to New Orleans. I used to be in New Orleans once a month for like the last year. For at least a week at a time. I knew all those guys' names, and I always valeted. I always tipped because they were just so on it, so on point. And I found out they're PMC valets, right? Like I did the PMC logos on their shirt. They're wearing a hotel shirt. They're wearing a hotel shirt to different colors, so you don't notice it offhand. But now that I can't unsee it now, and I'm like, that's why I love those guys so much, because they were hustling, they were doing the job. Because when I went to another hotel down in Montgomery, Alabama, different company, and they were not the same. It was not the same experience. They didn't get the same tip ratio. They didn't get the same situation. Or I tried to find a way to self-park, right? So that matters. And lastly, those client surveys that I'm getting experience with them right now, which is why they're at front of mind, is you see when your people are doing stuff well. I have an area manager who I already knew from my first introduction with him last week. He was going to be a game changer. But this client survey talking about how this guy is on point, what he's doing for the hotel, the extra effort he's putting forward, not just with the interfacing with the general managers, but with the guests and the valets and how that's translating. That's some proof in the pudding. And that was almost an immediate like flash to bang result, right? Like, is this guy the right fit for the area manager spot? Yes, because I got clients saying that he's good.
Feedback on the survey or from the client.
That's right. Yeah. When you take the time to type something out, right, like that matters. Yeah. Like people are just they tell you something in passing is one thing, but they're sending back the survey telling you these people are great, right? So
Yeah, and it's history. Like our company does a lot of survey. We do thousands of surveys regularly over the course of a year with all range of companies around employee feedback. And one of the interesting things you're pointing out, it's you get especially in the open-ended section, you tend to get a lot more negative comments than positive comments. Like the ratio is something like 5 to 1. And so when you do get a positive comment, it's really valuable because it's actually really a lot more valuable than the negative, because it's very easy for people to put, and often the way questions are worded, what could improve here, what could improve there, as opposed to what's working well. So that to actually someone to take the time to write out a positive comment is usually a really good indicator that, oh, this is important, much more than 3 or 4 less positive comments or neutral comments. And the other thing that points out to me is just there's this, I think it was Aubrey Daniels. He wrote a number of books around feedback and performance management. And the one thing I remember doing one of his courses, like this is probably going back 25, 30 years, is as managers to focus on catching people doing things right or doing the right thing. Because as humans, we're sort of bred to catch what's going wrong because you're always trying to fix that and you want to mitigate risks and problems and all that sort of stuff. And he was a real game changer for me because if we can catch people doing the right things, you're encouraging that modeling behavior, encouraging that behavior. And if you can see that happening, and people are much more likely to repeat it. Because, oh, I guess I was doing the right thing. I'm going to do it more and more. And it's sort of what you talked about very early on when you first joined the organization of PMC, is they brought you around to a number of areas and told you, here's what good looks like, or here's what great looks like, is what you talked about when you went to sort of that onboarding and meeting different aspects of the company. If you're the CEO, of a company like PMC or a mid-sized company, what one change would you make to help bring people from government or veterans or military and help them make that transition into private sector? As they move it, is there things that you would do, or one thing that you would do to help organizations do that better or do that well? And maybe it's pointing out the experience you had that worked really well for you, or something that you would point out that you'd like to see done better.
Have a feedback mechanism, right? For those interviews, right? And I got it. A lot of it's hard. People don't want to necessarily engage in balanced feedback or even reinforcing feedback. Even if it's all good, and then deliver. But we're going to move on with this other candidate. If I got feedback for all those interviews, all those resumes, I got feedback from one place. And the only reason I got it was because the HR guy that was on the team, on the panel that interviewed me, was a prior Navy, right? So that connection is probably the only reason why he called me. Otherwise, I just don't get anything. In fact, you go through an interview and you feel it's so good, like you nail it, you hit it out of the park. And a lot of these companies will do lunch and they're sit with you for hours, and you think you've answered all the questions, that you've done all the research and you were ready, and they don't give you any feedback. I can't stand that. Like if I was a CEO, I would immediately, if I had any say over it, even a VP of HR, I said, give our people feedback. If you're telling them no, tell them why, right? Unless you talk to them and you absolutely would never hire them for anything. I'm talking to mow your grass. You would never hire them for anything. They're that bad, right? And most people say, oh, they're not that bad. I say, okay, then you need to call and give them some feedback, right? So that way they can come back to you at some point, either improved, or maybe a year from now, they have a change in circumstance and you're the first person they call because you were the only one that gave them feedback, right? That matters. That's putting the company in a good light, and that's putting the people that you work with and hire at the forefront. That's where I at. If I had to change one thing.
I like that. Yeah. And you're right. When I think about, you don't get that feedback. Most people don't get that feedback. They just go, thank you, but we decide to move on or whatever. What would that feedback look like? Is that a phone call? Is that written feedback? Or is it just any feedback is going to be valuable? Is there anything that you'd sort of tell our listeners that, hey, if there's one type of feedback you provide, what would it be and format?
Well, I mean, what I tell people all the time, the hardest feedback to to get angry at is verbal feedback, like a phone call or in person. People avoid controversy like it's the plague, right? So if you want to give feedback and not get like a rebuff of it, you have a phone call, it's a little easier. If you send an email, right, any feedback, I don't care how you do it, right? Like that's what I would tell people. I'm not unreasonable. If I know that my manager's not comfortable doing it, it's like create a template, put 3 things that you want to see improved, or maybe do the sandwich thing, make sure it's balanced, and send that email. That's it. Fine, right?
So your message is get just something
Just
out,
get
any
it.
format.
Just get
at
it,
least
right?
something is better than nothing.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's right.
Okay.
So
And then if it's ideal, then a phone call would
a
be
phone
a
call
verbal
would
feedback
work,
be
right?
best.
Like a lot of people, I know for a fact, a lot of people, especially when you're this confident and you go into an interview, you get one thing of feedback, and the first thing, it's going to prop all these questions. And now now you're the guy, like, because I know I did it to my buddy who was the Navy guy that called me back. I hit him with like 3 or other questions. It's like, oh, wait a minute. What about this? I thought my tone and inflection was good. I thought this was good. And just in that interaction, I realized something. He told me, and he was very candid. He's just like, you do realize that the position you're applying for, most of them are college graduates. And it's like, well, I have my degree. It's like, yeah, you do. But most of those college graduates don't have the experience, the hard experience that you're trying to convey. So when they go to their interview, they're bringing a portfolio, they're bringing a PowerPoint. They've probably had 3 other emails, like with examples of their work or things they did in college for projects. You don't have any of that. You were just sitting there trying to talk your way into us convinced that you've done it. And I'm like, oh, why didn't someone just tell me that? Like, I spent 5 hours making a portfolio, right? And you know who got it? PMC. PMC got my portfolio, right? So
I really like that because it's so true. I had the benefit of going through business school, and part of going through, you learn that stuff. You learn, all right, here's how you research, here's how you interview, here's how you prepare. I never thought about, if you're in a government or military particularly for a long period of time, you're so out of that type of mindset and market that it's so easy to forget that, this is, and if no one tells you, how do you know? So simple feedback is what you're saying can really, really change things. And it did for you in terms of landing a good job and a great place and great company at PMC. Michael, this has been great. I really liked the conversation, and it was quite interesting to hear about your journey and a little bit. Is there one last thing you'd like to say or close off with that you want to highlight that we didn't touch on that you think is really important in terms of in light of the conversation?
yeah, currently right now in my Savannah footprint with PMC, I'm finding myself interacting with my employees a lot more, and I'm finding that there's a lot of value in what PMC offers. PMC, one of the big takeaways from this company, when I was in the interview process, I wrote a paper in college about this company because this company has a 501c3 attached to it. It's called PMC Cares. And the paper was about corporate responsibility, right? And I'm a red-blooded capitalist. I believe in profit. I think nonprofit and nonprofit company, that's an oxymoron, right? PMC delivers profit, but they have a mechanism to take care of their employees. And right now I'm in the process of utilizing that PMC Cares process to take care of one of my employees' families. And I tell you, it's what a comfort, what a treat to know that I'm a part of a company that cares as much about their employees as I did when I cared about my Marines and their welfare, right? They're putting it first. They don't have to. They're going to put money where their mouth is. They don't have to. They're going to do it because it's the right thing to do. It's not a PR move. They're not going to get any benefit from it. Like they're not going to be a newspaper article about it. It's the right thing to do. And you know what? Guess who's going to get the benefit of that? Because like I said earlier, the hotels, the clients, they're the ones that are the forward-facing part of our business. Everything we do right translates to them, just like the bad, right? So this situation with PMC Cares and having a company that has that mechanism in it, I hope my clients are happy and satisfied that they know that their people are being taken care of, whether they're immediately employed by them through the hotel or they're servicing their hotel on their drives, right? So I hope to be with this company for another 10 years because they care, right? And they put their money where their mouth is. So I just wanted to highlight that relentless hospitality goes both ways.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up because, particularly in the market today, and I know with all the turbulence that's going on, all the noise outside, both politically and economically, talent and finding the right people and finding people that can serve customers well is still a very hard to do, and it's very hard to keep them. And for companies that go above and beyond by putting employees high, putting employees' value on them, really does a lot to build the right type of culture for organizations. So that's fantastic to hear. Well, Michael, thank you very much. Appreciate you as a guest. It's been a very good conversation, great conversation.
This was a great experience, Sean. I hope we stay in contact, and I look forward to talking with you again.
All right. Thanks, Michael. Thanks for listening to Voice Activated. If you've heard something that got you thinking, don't keep it to yourself, share it. Talk about it, put it into play. That's how better workplaces get built. When you're ready to move from insight into action, head over to TalentMap.com. You'll find tools, resources, and strategies to help you lead better with clarity, empathy, and impact. And make sure to follow or subscribe so you don't miss any more real conversations with leaders who know that some of the best ideas for change don't come from the top, but from those employees closest to the work.